Welcome to the Who Wants to Be a Certified Planner session here at the conference. Hopefully you've been having a good Monday. And thank you to all of you who have come to this session. That shows that you are committed to potentially becoming a certified planner, and we're very excited about that prospect. So hopefully this session will help you today. My name is Asha Bleier, and I will be your game show host today. We really like to keep this session fun, interactive, and informative, so I hope you're all ready to participate. Our session mimics the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire game show because becoming AICP is just as rewarding as becoming a millionaire, right? Right, guys? Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So again, for you folks in the back, if you don't mind just stepping on up, we like to keep this fun and interactive, and participation is greatly appreciated as well. So before we get started, I would like to introduce our panelists, and we also have a brief presentation covering some AICP exam basics. Please note that at the end of our game show, we're going to be sharing with you all of our top secret, top 10 test-taking tips. So make sure that you don't miss that. There will also be time for Q&A. So again, my name is Asha Bleier. I'm a planner at Dudek, and I have served on the San Diego section, APA San Diego section for over 10 years, assisting with the AICP exam prep, and just recently stepped up into a state position as the AICP coordinator. And today I have a great group of people here supporting me. We've got Kimberly Brosseau. She is our California State Chapter Vice President for Professional Development. She actually previously served in my role as AICP coordinator for a few years. Her day job is senior planner at Santa Clara County Parks, and she earned her AICP in 2012? 2012, okay. We also have Lorena Cordova, a planner with the city of El Cajon. We actually started over 10 years volunteering for the AICP exam prep sessions together and recently reconnected, and she took over my role on the San Diego section as professional development officer. So thank you so much, Lorena, for your commitment to helping people become AICP certified. We've got Donn here. He's a senior planner at the city of Chula Vista. Stan actually really started the San Diego section's AICP exam prep, and I kind of took over his role. So we've got the full generations here. But thank you, Stan, for continuing the mission to help get people certified. And Darin Neufeld is a planning manager at the County of San Diego, and he's been volunteering for the AICP exam prep since he got his certification. So thank you all so much for being here today. Really appreciate it. We also have a couple other important people here today that I'd like to call out. We've got Marissa Aho. She's the AICP Commissioner, Region 6, California and Nevada. And we also have Sharon Graywall, I'm sorry. She's the planner for Alameda County, and she currently serves as the Northern Section Director, but she will be taking over Kim's role as Vice President Professional Development starting in January of next year. So thank you both for being here. And they are a great resource if you find them after the session or anytime during the conference if you have any questions. Okay, so with that, we'll get started here. Okay, so again, welcome everyone. We already went through the introductions. So I'd like to do a quick poll first. Who is taking the exam next month? All right, good handful of you guys. Okay, and who is planning to take the exam in May of next year? Good, all right. How many of you have taken the tutorial online? Okay, I like to ask that question because the APA National actually has a tutorial online that goes through some of the online exam basics, and I highly recommend that you check out the website and do that if you're planning, especially if you're planning to take the exam next month. And then how many of you are not at all registered for the exam yet? Okay, good. Okay, so a few basics. So scheduling your exam, the application window for the November exam period is, of course, already closed. You should have received your final notifications as to whether you can sit for the exam by now. The registration deadline to sit for the exam is October 31st. So remember, don't forget that you have to actually apply to register for the exam. After you get your acceptance that you can take it, you have to go to the Prometric website, and we have the website provided here for you. And make sure that you actually select your date and time. And I really recommend you do this as soon as possible if you have a specific date and time in mind. So, the testing window is November 5th to November 19th. The testing application for the May exam usually comes out around December. So it's not out yet, but keep an eye out for that if you're planning to take it in May. Just a couple on-exam day tips. Arrive early, 30 minutes at least. Make sure you bring 2 forms of ID. Passport, driver's license needs to have your name and picture. Just your name on your ID must match your ATT, which is your authorization to sit for the exam. Calculator, scratch paper provided. We always say wear layers because sometimes the room gets cold or hot and that can be distracting while you're trying to take the exam. You are not allowed to take anything inside with you. They will provide you with scratch paper and a calculator. So probably most of you already know this, but just really briefly, it is a 4-hour exam. Again, it starts with a 15-minute tutorial, but you're able to take that on the APA Nationals website in advance. So I highly recommend that so that when you go and you're sitting there in the exam, that 15-minute tutorial, you can whiz by it and it looks familiar and it's not new information for you. So definitely do that. 170 questions. Now, 150 questions are counted towards your score. 20 questions are actually called pre-test questions. This is a little confusing, but those questions are not scored. Those are what are called test questions that National is just kind of testing out to see how people score and see if they want to put those questions on future exams. I like to bring this up because I'm pretty certain that when I took the exam, it was front-loaded with several of these because they had my head kind of in a tizzy, and I had to remind myself, okay, hopefully these are just pre-test questions and these are not actually being scored. So just keep that in mind. A scaled score of 55 or greater is passing. The questions are scaled, and it's not just a 1 point per question. So one question might be worth 4 or 5 points. One question might be 1 or 2. So keep that in mind as well. Okay, the outline of the subject matter. It's a majority, as you can see, of the plan making and implementation in areas of practice, so really practical information. The fundamental planning knowledge is sort of that, the history, knowing the case law, people, important people, and things like that. You've got your leadership, administration, and management, 5%, and your code of ethics, 10%. So again, it is a computer-based exam. And you have the opportunity to mark questions, skip questions. There's a review feature at the end of the exam. And once again, there's an online tutorial available as well. So what I like to do is just kind of provide a snapshot of what the exam looks like. And again, if you do the online tutorial in advance, you'll get a little bit of this as well. But you can see here that you can mark a question or unmark a question. This is kind of what your review page is going to look like. So it'll show you your marked questions, your completed questions, or if you've skipped any. And then the review features at the end, you can either review your entire exam again, or you can just review the questions that you've marked, or review the questions that you've left incomplete. Please remember that you're not penalized for leaving a question blank. So you want to fill out all of your questions, because you are not penalized. And let's see, a couple tips for taking the exam. We do recommend going through the exam twice if you have the time, and maybe that just means going through your marked questions. First time, those easy questions, the ones that are the history or the people or the case law that factual, get those right away. You can use that mark function, the mark function. Make sure you kind of keep your eye on the clock. You can go through a second or third time your marked questions. Again, no penalty for wrong answers. and check all the other questions, but be careful about second-guessing yourself. And just lastly, becoming AICP is a really important part of the planning process. It's really highly valued, and you really feel just like a millionaire. I mean, it's that rewarding. But really, it follows you through your career. It's not something that's tied to your employer or anything. And just to briefly cover the responsibilities, once you're AICP, you are required to do continuing education. You're held to a code of ethics, and responsible for professional activities and your service to the profession. So, before we get to game time, really quickly, I'm just going to let each of our panelists go through their top 10 test-taking tip as I get the game ready. And so we can go ahead and start with Kimberly.
Okay, so I took the exam in December of 2015 or November of 2015, and I think one of the biggest tips that I wish somebody would have really stressed to me was that the exam is a comprehensive exam. And so the foundation, if you will, should be knowing the basics and the fundamentals of planning, so knowing your law, your history, your ethics. But outside of that, consider that it is a comprehensive exam, so the idea that it's scenario-based is really important. It's a multiple choice exam, and so it would be really beneficial not only to have the foundation of the facts in terms of law, ethics, important figures in history, but also to comprehensively approach each question with, okay, if I was a certified planner, how would I approach this scenario? So make sure that you keep in mind that it is a comprehensive exam. That would be my tip.
Hi, I took mine in 1997, so that was quite a while ago. But I was the AICP coordinator for about 7 years with San Diego section, and during that time I did take it twice as a PDO. And my discovery from when I took the exam was the reason why I think I failed the first 2 times, not because I didn't know the information, but I didn't know how to take the test. So my biggest tip to you would be get a test-taking booklet or do a program on how to take tests, because the test is written like a GRE. And how many of you are not very good with multiple choice questions? Because we planners tend to read into things. And so when I took it the 3rd time, I studied with a graduate student, and she really helped me to make distinct key words in the questions and to eliminate questions and to pick the best one out of the 2. So that's my biggest tip. And also to make a commitment to spend the time that you need, because everybody's different. And so what I found was the practice exams that were available, I spent a lot of time looking at those because it showed me where my weakness was. And then I would say get enough rest. 2 days before the exam, don't study anymore. Just make sure you get plenty of rest. And then also to visit the test site before your day of taking the test, because the day that I took my exam, I parked in the wrong structure, and and it took me half an hour to find out where I was supposed to be at. So I was already flustered by the time I got there. So anyway, those are the things that I would say to consider, and good luck to you all.
I took my AICP exam in 2014. I originally scheduled it for the May session, and I don't know if you all know this, but you get 1 free move to the next time slot. I think they still do that. So I ended up taking it in November. I felt pressed for time and didn't feel like I was quite ready. To that, my top tip would be to allow yourself enough time to prepare. I think I've heard many times it's 200 hours. You need at least 200 hours. But it depends on how you study and your background. I didn't get a degree in planning, so I felt like I needed to put in more time towards the test. And then in that vein, I would say do as many practice tests as you possibly can, because you're going to get all your timing down. You're going to know how quickly you need to move through questions. You're going to get a general sense for how the test works that way. You'll be better prepared on test day.
Again, as Asha mentioned, I received my AICP in 2012. My tip is don't feel bad if you don't pass the first time. Has anyone taken the test already and not passed? I didn't think anybody had failed the first time. I was really overwhelmed. I said, I'm never going to take this exam again. Why did I do this? And instead, I talked to people and realized I wasn't alone. I used every resource. So another tip is use as many resources as you want. I was trying to save money. I was trying to save time. There's so many great resources out there. And as such, I really learned about all those different options. And then now I became the AICP coordinator and now the vice president of professional development. So what I thought was, failing, not going to try again. I did. I learned a lot, and now I'm in this role, so it's been really rewarding.
All right, thanks everyone. Okay, as I'm opening the game, as we're opening the game, I'll just give a couple of my tips as well. So, kind of playing off of what the others said. I feel like the exam is really a multiple layered process. You get your flashcards going, you do your memorization, and you have all your factual information. And then from that part, you really have to connect the dots and see about how you apply this information and how these different periods in time actually made an impact on the planning profession. Something else that's really important is you do want to always think as a national planner. Here in California, we have our very specific ways about doing things. We've got the CEQA environmental. We've got a lot of really California-specific ways of thinking. And, thank you. And to that respect, you really have to take a step back. And when you're taking the exam, do not think like a California planner. A lot of people make that mistake. You also don't want to think like your everyday planning practice, even though that information is really important as you're taking the exam. You kind of want to think about, okay, if I was a APA national planner and really kind of think like them. And the way you can learn how to do that is by reading the APA materials and resources and knowing for these scenario-based types of questions, what would they do? What do they think the correct answer is? Not what would you do, sitting in your planning profession, wherever it is, whether you're public or private. So, okay, we're almost ready here. Yes. So, you have to delete the game. Okay, so while we get this running, I need 4 lucky volunteers to come up and play the game with us. Who would like to join us? Okay.
There are prizes involved.
There are prizes. All right, a couple in the back, come on up. We need one more.
We'll help you through it.
And again, and this is also going to be collaborative, so you're not going to be put on the spot answering questions all by yourself. Thank you. Testing. Okay. Hello. All right. Okay, everybody ready? Here we go.
Okay, in 1969, Ian McHarg published, was it Site Planning, The History of the City, The Sound of Music, or Design with Nature?
Okay, so you guys can collectively come up with your answer and decide who you want to.
Okay, we all knew. It's Design with Nature, D.
Okay.
Is this your final answer?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Hold on, the suspense. Are you sure?
100%.
Great job. All right, next question.
She wrote The Death and Life of Great American Cities in 1961.
Jane Jacobs. C. 100% sure.
All right, you're on your way. Okay, next question,
Okay.
Stan.
We are on question number 3. What was the first law to institute federal protection for preserving archaeological sites? A, National Monument Act of 1906. B, Arizona Desert Act of 1912. C, Antiquities Act of 1896. Or D, the Antiquities Act of 1906.
The answer is D. Antiquities Act of 1906.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, question 4. Health and safety regulations give local jurisdictions the power to enforce A, building codes, B, curfews for neighborhood parties, C, exaction of development impact fees, or D, development standards.
The answer is A. Building code.
I think you're sure.
Okay, go ahead,
Next
Kim.
question. Which of the following is not a primary principle of community protection through environmental design? Natural surveillance, natural connectivity, tutoriality, or natural access control?
It's B, this is on the A, this is on the other one.
You also have your 50/50, your phone a friend, and ask an audience still available if you want to use that.
It's when you design it so that you look like you have territory over your space so that, I should know this better, but territorial is definitely first, okay. It's about having,
So it's not connectivity
yeah, because you don't have any connection with nature. It's all about, because surveillance, you surveil your space, and then control. The others are, these are about control, and that's about connection. So that one's not like the others.
That's true, it's not like the others.
It's B, it's not like the others.
B,
B.
Is that your final answer?
final answer.
It was also on a practice test.
Alrighty, which of the following are characteristics of new urbanism? Higher density and mixing of uses, variety of housing choices and grid street patterns, economies of scale and Euclidean zoning, pedestrian scale and multimodal transportation systems.
The answer is B.
That was
So
quick.
1, 2, and 4 only.
Final answer.
Yes.
Wow, impressive. All right, you're still in it.
Yeah, you guys are smoking this.
I know, they're ready for the exam.
Question number 7. Adverse consequences of urban sprawl include all of the following except increasing energy prices, increasing density, reduction in agricultural land, or increasing average vehicle miles traveled.
Answer is B. Increasing density. 100%.
Okay, question 8. In a planning office, PERT or PERT would be most useful in implementing a new general plan for the city, determining the costs of benefits of building a new freeway, formulating and executing a 5-year capital improvement plan, or assessing the impacts of an annexation on public services.
So while they're kind of deliberating, I just want to bring up that this type of question is really indicative of those on the exam, where it's not kind of a straightforward, what's the definition of PERT, but rather, how does it apply, right? So you have to really connect those dots. You guys ready?
Yes.
Okay.
The answer is C. Formulating and executing a 5-year capital improvement plan.
Okay, and so why did you select that one?
B should be cost effectiveness and D should be cost revenue or fiscal impact.
Okay, so you guys have studied up. Let's see. This Is that your final answer?
Yes.
Great job.
Next question. Which of the following statements is not true about the Tennessee Valley Authority? The first director of the TVA was Harry Truman. In 1933, the TVA was created as an independent government agency for regional planning. The TVA was concerned with redevelopment of the Tennessee River Valley. The TVA's programs included flood protection, water management, recreational development, and power generation.
The answer is A.
Is this your final answer?
So suspenseful. You're putting it all on the line. Do you guys want to use one of your aides? You have someone ready to help.
A.
Okay. Woo! Woo! Okay. Next question.
Okay. According to the U.S. Census, what can be described as the smallest geographic unit for which the Census Bureau tabulates 100% data? A, census tract, B, census block, C, census, or D, none of the above?
B, census block.
All right, final answer?
Yes.
Yeah, it's practical. They publish the track level.
All right, next question.
Okay, question 11. You are doing very well on the exam right now, in timing-wise. So you disagree with the determination of the planning director regarding new development proposed near a sensitive wetland. Which of the following actions is the most appropriate? A, submit a letter to the editor of the local newspaper for publication detailing your opinion. B, ask the planning director for a meeting to discuss the determination. C, write a scathing letter to the executive director of APA AICP explaining your position. Or D, organize a meeting with the other members of the department to explain your position.
The answer is B. Ask the planning director for a meeting to discuss the determination.
Okay. So why did you guys select that one?
That's the most appropriate first step.
Yeah, you
Good.
might be wrong.
Yeah, for questions like this, we want to remember, okay, what's the first step that you want to make, right? Okay, final answer?
Yeah.
Okay. You guys are almost there.
All right, question 12. Smart growth planning was which of the following, or has which of the following as its goals? Environmental protection, social equity, economic vitality, or all of the above?
D, all of the above. Yeah.
Final answer?
Yes.
So do you want to stop now and take the money or keep going?
We keep going.
All right.
Next question. In Golden versus Planning Board of the Town of Ramapo, 1972, the New York Court of Appeals upheld the zoning ordinance that made issuance of a development permit contingent on the presence of public utilities, drainage facilities and parks, road access and firehouses, or D, which is A, B, and C.
So while they're discussing, another little tip, the questions on the exam, for the most part, are going to be A, B, and C, A and D, C and B, those types of questions. So while these are somewhat indicative of the exam, when you actually go to take the test, they're going to be a little bit more complicated. So do keep that in mind as well. Sounds like they might need a little help on this one.
You still have 3 lifelines.
You want to use the lifeline? Okay. You guys can use another lifeline if you like. You're pretty close to the end.
We're still 50-50, but we're gonna go with D, all of the above.
Is this your final answer?
Yes.
Okay, a barometer of future economic activity is measured by which of the following? Stock market, 12 leading indicators. Oh, please forgive me on this one. Punxsutawney Phil's shadow, double-digit unemployment.
Okay. B is the answer. Yes.
Yes.
Are we sure? Okay. Okay, guys. we've got
Okay, this
the
is for all
million-dollar
the
question.
marbles now. The Federal Highway Act of 1956, 1, required public investment in the infrastructure to help those who are most disadvantaged. 2, was the largest U.S. public works program ever undertaken. 3, extended the road system by 41,000 miles. Or 4, was the basis for the movie Cars.
So this is kind of what I was telling you guys, that there's the multiple options. I had a lot of questions that were structured like this. I don't know about you guys, but I had a lot of questions on the exam structured like this. So.
I think all of us agree with that.
I mean, it's our last question.
Do you want to ask the audience for fun?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's ask the audience.
You don't have to share your money with them, though.
Okay, so audience, would you agree with this? Okay, we have consensus. You want to select C?
Yes.
Final answer?
So you want to have these guys in your study group.
All right, no candy?
I really need more of these cards.
Okay, let's hear a round of applause for our $1 million winners. Soon to be AICP. Oh, perfect. Okay, so now that we all know how it works, I need 4 more volunteers. Come on up.
You can do it.
Let's get some of those folks in the back again. All right, come on, guys. I'm going to have to handpick you out.
Who's taking the exam in November?
Okay, who else is taking the exam in November? All right.
Yay.
Good job. Let's get a couple more. All right, couple more. How about this gentleman over here? Come on down.
Yeah, front row, there we
Let's go. It's a group effort. We'll make this one quicker so we can get to our top 10 tips. All right, couple more volunteers.
I need help, come on.
Come on. We've got index cards. Goody treats. All right, let's take this gentleman back here who was eager to raise his hand earlier.
Yes.
Come on. All right, we'll do a trio this time if nobody else is interested in joining. Okay, let's get started.
Okay, first question. He developed the 1916 New York City zoning code. Was it Edward Bassett, Frederick Law Olmsted Jr., Franklin Roosevelt, or Lou Gehrig? Is that your final answer?
Final answer?
He's like, yeah.
Okay, next question.
Okay. The World's Columbian Exposition 1893 was the showcase for Daniel Burnham's A, White House, B, White Paper, C, White City, or D, White Pants. My favorite.
We go with C.
Final answer? Good job.
Good job. Transit-oriented development is a design feature developed by whom? A, Clarence Perry, B, Peter Calthorpe, C, Daniel Burnham, or D, Richard Babcock.
So for those of you in the audience, as they're deliberating on the question, when you're taking your practice exams, remember that for this example, you want to make sure that you know all the people in the responses, right? So hopefully you guys have an idea of who this is, the correct answer. But something to think about that as you're doing those exams, you should be aware of all the different people in these responses.
Pull the audience lifeline.
All right. Okay, does the audience concur? B? All right, I hear some heads nodding. Or you see some heads nodding?
B, final answer.
Okay.
Great job. Question 4. Which of the following is true about capital improvement budgets and capital improvement programs? The CIP budget refers to facilities planned for the next fiscal year. The CIP program refers to improvements scheduled in succeeding 4 or 5 years. A CIP budget is part of a legally binding one-year fiscal budget, or all of the above.
We'll go down together. D, final answer. D.
D.
D?
Okay, next question. A senior planner working in county government has been asked to complete a housing study. Which of the following data would he or she use to initiate the study? The most recent census, building permit records, assessment information, or housing data from a neighboring county?
Housing data from another city, from a neighboring city has no relevance. Assessment information for housing study. We read over the what's your population study, kind of what's your population. I'm leaning towards A too. A. A, final answer.
All right, final answer. Good job. Okay, next question.
What type of pollutants are those related to overland runoff of rainwater and has multiple entry points into a water body? A, point, B, ambient, C, non-point, D, effluent.
Oh, you're phoning one of our panelists up here. Okay, you want to use your lifeline?
Oh, you've reached the voicemail for Kim. I'm at a planning commission and cannot return your call. I'm just kidding. I know that it's really important to know all of the terms when studying for the AICP. I think I'm going to go with C.
All right, final answer. Nice work.
Who's next? Yeah. You're up.
It's question number 7. Which of the following could be part of a PUD, planned unit development? Single-family residence, apartments, commercial and institutional uses, or industrial?
All right, we have consensus. D, final answer. No, D.
D. Sorry, guys. Okay, we're going with D. Final answer? All right. Well, we're halfway there.
So I like this question a lot because my reminder is to think nationally. I actually had this question on the exam, and I was so focused on California and Santa Clara County, and I thought, well, we don't do industrial, and so I got it wrong. So again, think very nationally on these questions.
Okay, question 8. An intensive, interactive problem-solving process with meetings convened around the development of specific topics is described as a family meeting, Alinsky's organizations, advocacy planning, or a charrette.
D, final answer.
All right. Almost there.
Okay, next question. According to the Code of Procedures of the AICP Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct, an AICP member charged with ethics misconduct is subject to the final determination of the AICP Ethics Committee, the Executive Committee of AICP, the Executive Director of AICP, or the AICP Commission.
So I actually had a couple of questions just like this on the exam. You really need to study and memorize the Code of Ethics and the procedures and processes that go along with it. Some folks say they even record it and will kind of play it in the car or whatever you need to do to get that memorized, because there are a lot of questions that talk about the process and what you need to do. You've got another lifeline if you want to use it.
Go use 50/50? Or just go A? No, 250.
We can do whatever.
I'm thinking go A.
All right.
That's fine. Let's go with A. Final
A.
answer.
Is that your final answer?
All right, lucky guess.
Which of the following court cases are concerned with takings? Nolan versus California Coastal Commission, Country of Mexico versus State of California, First English Evangelical Lutheran Church versus County of Los Angeles, or Lucas versus South Carolina Coastal Council.
D, final answer.
Oh, that was quick. All right.
So quick.
All right, question number 11. Hawaii was the first state to do which of the following? Adopt the use of EAs, adopt statewide land use zoning, adopt the use of tenement housing, or adopt the use of greenbelt cities.
Small state. Yeah. Because tenement houses around a lot more than that. They were around, NEPA was enacted in 10 years after they became a state. Adopt the use of greenbelt cities. B's out. All right, so say B. I think so. B, final answer.
You guys are getting close.
Okay, question 12. The Standard City Planning Enabling Act was issued in which of the following years? 1938, 1946, 1928, and 1926.
No, I think red light.
Yes, you have a 50-50 lifeline left. There you go.
I always say B or C in a multiple choice. Great. Roll dice. You two are going for me. Yeah. A 2-to-1 vote. So B. All right, B.
Wait, are you sure?
Do you guys agree out there?
I'll be honest, it's a 2-to-1 vote. I'm in favor of C, but the majority vote is B, so I'll go with.
Go with the minority on this one.
I'm kind of hearing the
Minority vote.
audience giving you
We already used that
assistance.
lifeline.
Yeah, you did. All right. You want to go B or C?
You guys said
All right. I'll let the audience decide for you. There we go. Okay, next question.
Again, it's very important to know dates for the exam. Next question. Neighborhood rather than regional planning may be more likely to address wetland and floodplain protection, airport accessibility, availability of grocery stores, provision of overnight parking for 18-wheelers.
So this question is kind of related to the spatial areas of planning practice, part of the planning implementation category. So kind of recognizing what's done on a neighborhood level versus regional versus a national or state level.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, it's a neighborhood. Yeah, I agree, but you're definitely. C, final answer.
Almost there.
Okay. Pennsylvania Coal Company versus Mahone, 1922, dealt with which of the following issues? Adult uses, exactions, takings, aesthetics.
Takings was Ambridge, Nolan, and Donn. actions may also be
So it's really important when you're studying to know the reason for the court case. What I did, for example, is I started reading through all the court cases, and there's just so much information to know. And I just ended up writing the name of the court case, and then on the back, whether it was a takings or adult uses or what type it was. And at least then when I took the exam, I was able to remember, okay, this case dealt with that issue, instead of writing the whole court case out.
And for me, I studied my case law kind of grouped so that I could kind of remember all my takings case law. I kind of grouped them together in my index cards, so that might be a useful tip as well.
Yeah, so I organized mine by First, Fourth, and 15th Amendment. So it's, speech, it's due process and takings, or it's discrimination cases. And you can that's helpful to do that because you can use process of elimination too, when the question is geared towards more, like less about what did the case do, but this was a takings case involving X. You can eliminate certain other cases because they're grouped in a different category.
Do we have an answer? The audience might be generous enough to help you out. I don't know. We'll see.
I'm hearing C, so let's go with C.
Okay. Final answer? Okay, last question.
Okay, this is it. Clarence Perry's neighborhood unit was a self-contained residential area bounded by major streets, shops at the intersections, or a school in the middle. And this is a tip for you. This is from the Green Book.
Do you recommend that we have the Green Book?
I would recommend, it's a very good resource because it really breaks down the key components of planning, and everything that we've talked about today is in categories in the Green Book. Yeah.
So, yeah, and I'll just add, when it comes to the Green Book, I think you're going to get a different answer every time you ask somebody. So it depends on your studying capabilities and how you absorb information. I didn't find the Green Book helpful at all, personally. Didn't read one page of it. Other people say that they read it cover to cover, and that's all they used for the exam. So, sorry, it's not a straightforward answer. But we're going to get into resources when we go through our top 10 tips as well, so we'll cover some more of that too. Last question.
D, final answer.
Great job, guys. Whoop.
Thank you.
So again, as you saw in the game, a lot of questions rely on you knowing not just a term or a year or a court case, but sometimes it's intermingled. And so then it's, again, basically one large question pulling in all the different knowledge that you've been using studying for the exam. So.
Exactly, and I think one of the key things, as I mentioned earlier too, was it's a comprehensive exam, so it really is asking you to know a little bit of everything and be able to apply it comprehensively. So really test your knowledge very thoroughly. And most of the questions tend to be very layered, I found. Like it just kind of built on several different topics all in kind of one big paragraph question.
And read carefully, especially when it's like 1 and 3, 3 and 4, all of the above, none of the above, because they are sometimes trick questions.
And sometimes your answer will be in another question. So just mark it, and then when you get to another question, you'll go, oh, that's a clue for my other question.
Okay, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties getting our top 10 tips up here. So I've called IT to come, but we can go ahead and get started. Okay, so for the top 10 tips, tip number 10, you want to make sure that you're familiar with the test-taking location and rules. So I know Stan touched on this quite a bit, but if you can, drive to the test-taking location, park, kind of practice getting there so that you don't have to worry about that on test day. Yeah. Yeah.
Are you seeing something?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, buddy.
No, I just connected this. Okay. Okay, and in the meantime, if you want to cover this one.
Number 9, read up on current trends in planning. Read up on current trends in planning. There's the planning magazine. There's the websites. The test. But don't get caught up in like current issues, because the test it was updated in November of last year, so it has some information, but it may not have information that's been in the news for the last 6 months, for example. But just be aware of some of the recent trends over the last few years.
And because it's a national exam too, you can look back at the programs from the National APA conference too, to see what people have been talking about over the last like 3, 4, 5 years. Because you can't read every planning magazine before your test. It's just not possible.
Another good tip related to reading up on current trends is also looking at what was the actual theme of the APA National Conference. I actually got that question on my exam. So if you can just kind of get an idea of what the themes are of the APA National Conferences. And then also looking at the APA policy papers. Those are found online. And those are basically papers that APA publishes on what they feel to be important topics. There's quite a few of them, but if you look at the APA National Conference themes, and then from there select the APA policy guides that are related, maybe like sustainability or water or agriculture, kind of think about what do they feel are the most important current trending topics, and then make sure you read those policy papers, because I definitely got a handful of questions specifically from those.
I can read from here. Learn court cases, people, planning terms, dates, events, and most importantly, the AICP Code of Ethics. I think that's where the colored index cards come in handy, because I had like yellow was court cases, green was planning terms, and then I could either intermingle them or just study planning terms for the day, go through them, and then when I was very comfortable, take those cards out and whatnot.
What I found helpful to frame that part of the test that has history, case law, code of ethics, and maybe Asha can find this for everybody, but I got a hold of a timeline that had like the last, I guess start to finish basically. And you could put in, because there's like 5 different housing acts, I think, and so you can group them by year. So if you get a question on a housing act, but it was in a certain time period because they discussed something else. I found that was a good way to kind of frame how I studied, and I did that at the start too, and so it kind of triggers when things are for you.
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, I feel like it's a multi-layered exam study process. In the beginning, you want to get your facts down, just memorize, 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 because you can't really progress and learn the connection of things and when things happened and who did what until you have that memorization done and the key facts in your mind. Another thing, the timeline that Darin's talking about, I know I got a great timeline from the Pennsylvania chapter. On their website, they have a study guide, and it is really amazing. And I've recommended it to all of our San Diego section AICP exam prep participants, and everybody's told me that they found it very helpful. So it's a free resource. You just go on their website. You can go ahead and get it from there. It's a PDF document. You can print it, and I would really look at that. They have a great timeline in there. So our tip number 7 is know specifics, but be prepared to answer broader questions. So again, this kind of gets into that studying technique of you've got to know all the little details, but when you get to the actual exam, there's going to be a lot of scenario-based questions that deal with all the different types of concepts and the different categories in one question. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add on that. Good. Okay, tip number 6. Remember to think academic, not practical. So this sort of gets to our point about getting away from being, a SQL planner and what do you do in your day-to-day practice. You have to really think like APA. What do they feel is the right action? What does the code of ethics say is the right action? What are the APA policy papers saying on this particular topic? You really got to put your mind into that zone.
So this is my plug for any of those who are looking at the AICP pilot program. Take the exam when you're right out of school. I waited a number of years, and I was so focused on the practical aspect of planning that I kind of didn't have the academic mindset. I had forgotten a lot of the terms and things I had learned in college, so I had to go through and relearn everything. So take it while it's fresh in your mind.
I definitely also think that it's important to kind of identify what kind of learner you are. I think we've all kind of echoed the same sentiment. If you are someone that can, read one book and then extract all the information, great. If you're somebody that maybe you haven't been in school for some time and you have a hard time kind of grasping concepts or ideas, give yourself more time. But I think really identifying what kind of learner you are is really important to be able to help you kind of figure out what your game plan is in terms of preparing for the exam, how much time you need, how many resources, and what your strategy is in terms of note cards, color coding, things like that.
Okay, great. Do you want to cover this one?
Tip 5, practice often with sample tests. There are a number of sample tests out there on a Planet Exam, AICP exam, study sessions, planning prep.
Yeah. So planningprep.com has some practice questions. They're online, they're free. I would think of those more like equivalent to using flashcards because they're brief questions, they're easy questions, they're helpful, but they're not at all like the exam. So I've had some people that have not passed the exam, they come to our San Diego section exam prep or this one here today at the conference, and they say, well, I did a ton of practice exams. Where did I go wrong? Well, you have to find the right practice exams. If you can get your hands on, Planetizen, they do a really full, robust AICP exam prep course. Their practice exams are pretty true to the exam. Be careful about the resources that you use. And just know that if the questions are pretty straightforward and a little on the easy side, that's probably not indicative of what you're going to see on the exam. You're going to see more of those lengthy, paragraph-long, scenario-based questions. You're a planning director in the state, and this happened. What do you do? Things like that. There are going to be some straightforward questions sprinkled throughout, but the majority of the exam is not like that. So if you have any questions about trying to get access to practice exams, feel free to contact one of us. We can help you through that as well. But Okay,
number 4, take advantage of available resources such as prep classes, books, practice exams, internet, etc. And we have a long list of resources. We're hoping the tech support will be here and we can show that on the screen for you. But there's just so much information out there. Again, planning prep, Planet Zen. hopefully we'll have our contact info up as well. I get a lot of emails from people saying, how can I start studying? I have a whole long list that I can send you. But again, hopefully we can get that up here. There's a lot of newer apps and websites that are out there as well. And other chapters, I don't know if we have a list on there. I think it's Pennsylvania, Colorado. If you Google like AICP exam prep classes, they have a lot of great slideshows and PowerPoint presentations. Study sessions, there's some great ones throughout the state, Los Angeles, San Diego, and Northern California. And we're hoping to get more information recorded and available as well. Do you guys want to add?
Yeah, and I'll just add really quickly too that this session is being recorded, so we can work to see if we can get the resources list out to you guys, whether it's through that or through the website, but we'll get that resources list out to you guys as well.
I also have my plug for the AICP Exam Prep 3. So the first time I didn't use it, I didn't think I needed it, and then I ended up purchasing it, and I found answers to the questions I knew I had missed on the exam. It's kind of like a Cliff Notes. It was really helpful. I personally didn't use the Green Book. I recommend the Green Book, especially if you don't have that planning career, but the AICP Exam Prep 3.0 was really helpful.
Yeah, and the AICP Exam Prep 3.0, I think, like you mentioned, though, it's more of an outline. It's not like you just purchase that and you have all the information and that's all you need to know. It kind of tells you what you need to know, but it doesn't give you the level of detail. So you're still going to need to have supplement resources. Again, I personally really recommend the Pennsylvania Chapter Study Guide. That covers a lot of the same stuff that the APA 3.0 does and gets into more depth on the different topics, and especially covering things like the project management techniques and tips, the timeline that I mentioned earlier. They have a really good section on case law. And internet resources, just do be a little bit careful. I really recommend that you stick to APA-based resources or like Planetizen. If you start to venture out just, Googling terms or using Wikipedia or something like that, you just have to be a little bit careful because the definitions that they have might not be the same as what APA feels. So, okay, tip number 3.
Create and use flashcards. Again, it's really helpful, especially if you color code them, and then you can take them to work and study on your lunch break or whatnot when you're watching TV. They're just great resources. And then as I was getting more familiar with them, I would put them aside and then go through those just couple of ones that I had difficulties with. And then I brought a few on the morning of the test and just kind of went through them really quickly before I went to take the test.
And then once you pass, burn them.
I think another good tip would be, like, if you have those flashcards, law, history, ethics, or whatever, you can have somebody else kind of quiz you. So somebody who's not a planner, just give it to them, and then they can read you a case or whatever, and you have to tell them what it is.
And I would go back and forth. So I would first do, like, the flashcards would say takings, Fifth Amendment, whatnot, and I would have to name the case. And then the person quizzing me would say then the case, and I'd have to know if it's a taking. So you can go back and forth to have your mind thinking both directions.
Okay, and tip number 2, find a study buddy and or form a study group. So some people are great at studying on their own, isolated. I feel like that's kind of rare just in my experience in helping people prepare for the exam. I personally, I just had a study buddy. Forming a group was a little bit too, with schedules and things like that. We weren't meeting, and I ended up just pulling one person and saying, okay, let's just do this. We prepared a whole study plan so that we knew that we had enough time before the testing period to cover all the different categories, and we just went through it together. And that way, for example, when you're looking at the APA policy guides, there's a lot of material. So if you have a study group or a study buddy, you can split it up and say, okay, you read this paper, I'll read this paper. Highlight it, make your notes, and then you reiterate like a summary of the paper to this person that helps you to memorize and kind of learn the material. So I found that really helpful, especially when trying to cover things like current events or reading Planning Magazine or all the breadth of documents that you have to review and understand.
Or if you're not familiar with a certain topic, maybe you're not familiar with transportation planning, find a study buddy that has that background, and then you can share your experiences.
Yeah, I do recommend trying to, if you're forming a study group or picking a study buddy, do try to find somebody that comes from a different field. That would be helpful.
Yeah, I was from the private sector, and so I didn't have the public experience, like the protocol of hierarchy of decision-making. So I formed a study group, and I had an urban designer, I had a county planner, and we were able to really kind of comprehensively help each other, and I learned a lot through that, and plus the test-taking practice exams. So some of the things that I was weak at, I would be able to ask them, and they would explain things to me. So that was really helpful.
Okay, and our number one study tip, Kim's going to try to work on the laptop bit and see if she can get our list of resources up for you guys. But our number one tip is give yourself the time to study. I know that sounds pretty silly, but I've had too many people that come to me and go, I didn't pass the exam. I felt like I didn't have enough time. I was really stressed out. You know, you have to give yourself the time. So even if you're signed up for the November exam, I'm not certain what the window is to do a test transfer, but they have a test transfer option. And just make sure that you allocate the time to get through the material. It's a lot of material that you have to cover, so.
Absolutely, I definitely. So there again, I, through this process, kind of identified, okay, what were kind of like my habits as I was preparing through exams in college. And I had to really kind of sit myself down, come up with a study plan, and then be really dedicated to this endeavor, which was, do I want to be a certified planner? Yes. Well, then how do I go about doing that? And I had to take this very seriously. And what you hear with most people, and I think we can all kind of attest to this, is that it's not something that you're going to decide to take, tomorrow, and then you're going to be ready for it. It's going to be something that you dedicate time and energy and seriously make a commitment to it. Not to mention the fact that, you're paying for the resources that you utilize to study, as well as pay to take the exam, and then it's an ongoing commitment to maintain that kind of credential. So I think it is, once you make the commitment, you really have to be committed to it from beginning to end.
We're happy to take any questions, if anyone has any. Go ahead, in the back. So it's a 4-hour exam, 170 questions, and you're able to leave the room to take a breath or remove your sweater or grab a sweater from the locker, whatever you need to do if you like. Time-wise, it would be good if you could find practice exams that are 170 questions long, so you can kind of time yourself and gauge how long you need to get through the exam. But typically, I've never heard of somebody just simply running out of time, if that helps. Go ahead.
Anytime.
Yeah, you can leave the room whenever you need.
It just,
Yeah, your time clock won't stop if you leave the room. You only have the 4 allocated hours. And remember, there's that 15-minute tutorial in the beginning. So if you do that before, you can click through it really quickly. But you do have that 15-minute tutorial. I took the exam in 2012, so it might have changed. Maybe they have more restrictions now on leaving the room and taking a break. So I'm not sure. Did you have any restrictions? Okay. So I don't know. That might be a newer thing then. Go ahead.
Here,
Oh, thank you, Greg.
I'll bring the mic out.
Hi, thank you. The first 20 questions are not graded, so you can just not answer them? I mean,
No, there are pre-test questions. There are the 20 pre-test questions, but those are sprinkled throughout your exam. You don't know which ones those are.
Okay,
I was
so-
just saying that I felt like in my particular exam that they were front-loaded and all in the beginning because all of my first questions kind of had me, I didn't quite know the answers, so.
all right, Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, I just have one more question.
Sure.
Because I took the exam and I was one of those unsuccessful people. So when my results came, I did really good in ethics and principles and everything, but my problem was in the leadership and management questions. And I wanted to ask you, what sources should I read and practice to get my scores higher in that category?
So actually, I can totally relate to this because it's an area unknown to me. I'm not in a management position at my public agency. And so what I found to be very helpful is just sticking with some of the comprehensive. So once you pick a comprehensive exam, there is a section dedicated to the different managerial styles. There's also different kind of budgets that are identified. Generally speaking, the items that are listed in the exam outline on the APA website are going to give you an indication of kind of what they're looking for. The rest is your exposure to that subject matter. So what I found really helpful was actually reading the material, being very familiar with terms, concepts, and definitions, but also shadowing the people on the management team at my public agency, just to get a little more comfortable with this sort of unknown subject matter. And I found that to be very helpful. So that may be an option for you.
And so you did mention that you did well in the ethics section, and I feel like the ethics section actually integrates a little bit into the management as well, just related to, okay, what step do you take? If this situation happens, what step do you take? And the Code of Ethics does sort of steer you in that direction as well. So you are going to want to look to the Code of Ethics. Again, that Pennsylvania chapter study guide has some good stuff in there. I don't know if you had used that at all when you studied for the exam the previous time, but that's helpful as well.
Yeah, this is where some people don't use the Green Book, but the Green Book does give you a management chapter.
So I'm actually on the sustainability committee for the conference, so I opted to not print this list of resources, so I apologize that we had some technical issues, but here it is. So please go ahead and take a photo if you like with your phone, and also I'm always happy to provide that if you want to either email me or the session will also be recorded, so it'll be available online. Any other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Hi, so 2 questions real quick. One, you said it's 170 questions. There's no written component to that, if I'm just to clarify. And then the second part is, in regards to the 55%, the score of 55 weighted, if you kind of go a little more into that, I'm like, does that mean like what, 55%? Or I know you kind of explained it before, but if you mind just re-elaborating on that, please.
Yeah, no problem. It is all multiple choice. There's no writing component. There's a little bit of math, so you'll have a calculator. It'll be pretty simple math, translating like square feet to acres or things like that. And you'll get a good idea of the math that you need in the AICP 3.0 guide or some of those resources. But it is all multiple choice. And what was the other part of the question? Oh, the weighting, that's right. So each question is weighted differently, and you don't know how we don't know how it's weighted. So there could be a question, like an ethics question, and maybe that one is given 2 or 3 points. And there might be a scenario-based question, and that one might be 5 points. So when you're going through the exam, you won't know which questions are weighted more heavily or not. But at the end, they will tell you in which categories you scored higher or lower. So if you do not pass, then you'll know at least what areas you need to focus your attention on. But hopefully after today, you'll have the resources you need, and that won't be an issue. But
So the questions are weighted in the sense that it's based on the comprehensive, everybody that's taking the test, how they answered that question. And so that, based on the scoring, then that question is weighted a certain number of points. And so you're really going to you're going to have some questions that are easy, some that are medium, and some that are more difficult. And so remember, it's that bell curve. And so the 55, what we say is the passing grade, would equate to about like 75%. So if you did your practice exam and you're scoring 75 or higher, then you're on the right track.
Yeah, thank you, Stan. This is good to know.
The question was, what's the total you can get on a score?
I think it's about 65 or 70 is the top score.
Any other questions? Go ahead, the first one there. Yeah.
So how has the test changed within the past year? Because I know there were a few modifications. So are any of these test prep things maybe a little outdated or, applied more historically? And I guess along with that, what are the things that changed from when all of you took the test to now?
Yeah, so we actually have someone on the panel that took the updated exam. But the exam basically went through a refresh. So they sort of refreshed some of their questions, but they didn't change it fundamentally too much. They did raise the ethics. I think went from like 5% to 10%. So there were a couple minor changes in that respect. Yeah, I think I have a slide at the end. But the resources and materials available are still very valid and very useful. All the history, all the case law, none of that has changed. When it comes to the planning implementation and the practice of planning, a lot of that content is the same as well. It's more just the way that they structure the questions and the different categories. Would you say that's correct?
I would agree.
Yeah.
Remember, your topics are very similar. And so for your history, like Darin said, just remember time periods and time frames, because your history, your law cases, your code of ethics, those are what we call gimmies. So you want to make sure you score those, like get all those correct.
Okay, we had a couple more questions.
Okay,
Sorry, Greg.
it's all right.
Go ahead, this one first.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Christina. My question was on the actual application to take the test and the exam questions, or not the exam questions, but the application questions. I've looked at them several times and attempted to answer them several times, and they're very intimidating, and I've gotten quite turned around and confused as I'm trying to answer them. So I'm wondering if maybe there's some keys, some things to maybe just simplify it in my head.
Yeah, so when you're preparing your application, that's quite a process as well, right? And I've actually had a number of people tell me that they've been denied to sit for the exam. And when we go back through their answers, they either just didn't quite reiterate the same buzzwords and key topics that were in the question, or it was a matter of their experience, their number of years of experience just kind of missed the mark slightly in some respect. But when it comes to answering the questions, I think that if you want to email me or Kimberly, we can kind of more closely talk to you about that if you're having any particular issues with answering the questions. But you really want to just stay on the main topics that they're covering and try to use the words in the question throughout your answer, if that makes sense.
Sometimes it helps to have somebody else look at it. I've had a couple people approach me and say, "Oh, I got turned down the first time. Can you take a look at my questions?" And then I could give them some advice. So me or Asha or your section PDO could help.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I would add too, if you haven't already, so our APA has the exam candidate bulletin, which is like a 23-page document, super helpful and actually addresses the question of the criterion for the application, and then it kind of has a little checklist for you to kind of go through each of them to make sure that when you provide your response, you can actually go back and make sure that you've actually hit all the items on the checklist. So that would be one. And then the other thing is super, super helpful, and I know that this group can definitely attest to this. the early bird registration, the early bird window for application is priceless. You should definitely do it because it allows you the opportunity to submit your application and then get a response if for some reason or another you're unable to provide a sufficient response to one of the criterion, or maybe miss something with your verification of your experience or your education, you're able to revise that and resubmit and still make the same testing window. So highly encourage people to do the early bird registration.
Okay, any more questions? We have one more there.
I just had a question about the testing locations, kind of like with the breaks. Just, is it a general testing center that you go to? And I suppose they each have their own rules. I knew somebody that they didn't let them go in with sandals to take the test, so just advice on what to wear or what to look out for.
Yeah, one thing I forgot to mention, I brought earplugs and ones that were comfortable for me. They'll give you like a headset one, but they made me like really hot because other people are taking the GRE, all kinds of questions, and people will be like banging on the keypads the whole time. And so you definitely want to do something that's comfortable for you so you can stay focused.
Yeah, it's at the Prometric Testing Center, so it is for, multiple variety of exams. So you might be seated next to somebody who's like feverishly working on calculations or, who doing a writing exam and typing on the keyboard. So that's a really good tip. As far as what your testing center requires, then I would just recommend contacting them in advance and asking, because I haven't heard of some of these requirements personally. So I would recommend contacting them.
And I think somebody said it too, but one other just sort of practical thing is to wear layers too, because my test location was freezing. Some might be hot, so you could just like take your sweater off or whatever, but little things.
And in my testing center, they required me, if I wanted to take my sweater off, I had to leave and take it off, put it in the locker, and then I could re-enter. So you can't just sit there and take your sweater off and put it back on. So just something to keep in mind too.
I had to pull out my pocket liners when I went to use the restroom and came back, and then I got questioned about my watch, and I don't have an iWatch or any of those other fancy ones, so keep that in mind as well.
Anything else?
Just wear stuff that you're comfortable with, and because you're going to be there for 3-4 hours.
I don't know if you mentioned this before. So when I took the exam, I went through, I did all the questions, I marked ones I wasn't sure of, took a break, went to use the restroom, came back, and then went through the ones that I had marked, and then kind of did another look through. Because be careful. Also, don't overthink. I know I overthought on a couple of them. I kept changing my answers, and I'm sure I got those wrong. And also, I wanted to say that there's scholarships available as well to take the exam. We'll have more information on the chapter website in December, and then we'll have the scholarship opportunity early next year.
Yeah, so for those of you looking to take the exam in May, keep an eye out. The application window opens in December, and like Lorena said, it's really helpful if you can get your application in the early bird for processing.
And again, our contact information, sorry, it's not up on the slide, is on the chapter website. Again, I'm Kimberly, Brosseau, Asha, and the section PDOs are listed on there as well. So sometimes people don't know what section they're in, so feel free to send me an email, I can check, and we all want to assist you with the exam prep.
All right, thank you everyone. Happy studying.
Thank you.